We have this story from Axios. Pro-Israeli hackers claim cyber attack on Iranian bank. Reportedly, they have shut the bank down, and this predatory Sparrow Israeli hacking group claims to have stolen upwards of $90 million in crypto from an exchange. They say predatory Sparrow, an Israeli hacking group, said today that is behind a series of cyber attacks against Iran's bank SEPA. The group, which publicly goes by the Farsi translation Ganjeshki Darande, added that it's also deleted the state-owned banking system's data. This is what happens to institutions dedicated to maintaining the dictator's terrorist fantasies. Axios could not immediately verify these claims. Now, as the war is heating up, we have this from the Jerusalem Post, one of the most terrifying, in my opinion, statements yet, where they actually made the argument. Check this out. They say Trump needs to take decisive action against Iran. Mr. U.S. President Trump, it's time to match words with decisive action, in which they say, embrace regime change as policy, and in their last point, call for the partition of Iran. This will fail, is psychotic, and will result in militaristic conflicts, insurgency, and chaos in the region for 100 years or longer. We are talking about partitioning 92 million people. It depends on your estimate. It could be upward. Some Wikipedia says 85. Some estimates have it higher than that, between 90 and 92. This is a degree of insanity that we have not seen in a very long time. The fear, of course, is Donald Trump is going to be called to intervene. He was going to give a statement on this yesterday, something related to an urgent action, and he didn't. He later then came out and said they were installing flagpoles. Nobody thinks that was actually going to be the message. They're also reporting open source intel, predatory sparrows, as I mentioned. I'm sorry, it's not 90 million. They're claiming $1.8 billion in crypto was wiped out to just about 100 million. Stealing $1.7 billion in crypto. They were using this crypto to bypass sanctions. Now, there are deep concerns about what happens if the U.S. is to get involved, and it's looking like that may be the case. So Trump has said that he doesn't want to be involved in a long-term war. He just wants to make sure Iran does not get any nukes. Now, I'm going to be pulling in Senator Rand Paul to talk about this, as well as the big, beautiful bill in immigration enforcement, as well as some of the issues surrounding the senator himself. So I believe we've got this coming up. Senator Rand Paul, can you hear me?
I can.
Thank you for joining me.
Glad to be with you.
There are a lot of topics surrounding you particularly. I know that you've maintained your principles on foreign intervention and war. Just because it's big in the news, I'm curious what your position is on U.S. involvement in Iran, and do you think we will, the United States, intervene militaristically in the war?
I fervently hope that we will not. I don't think it's a good idea. And I say that even if the president should decide to do it, he would have to come to the Congress in advance and ask for a declaration of war. The Constitution is very clear on this. Madison was very clear. Madison wrote that the executive branch is the branch most prone to war. Therefore, we gave this power to the legislative branch. And this isn't a surprise attack. This wouldn't be a sneak attack. This would be something everybody's been deliberating on the front page of the newspaper. There's absolutely no reason why he shouldn't ask the permission of Congress. Now, I doubt that happens, but that's the way it's supposed to happen. And then there's the other question of, even if you have constitutional permission to do it, is it wise and will it lead to the outcome you want? And I think there are two possibilities, and it's unknown. One possibility is that Iran is humiliated, they feel utterly defeated, and they say, I'm sorry, we will no longer work on nuclear weapons, we want to be friends, now you defeated us. The other possibility is they rush headlong towards development of a nuclear weapon, and they announce within a month that they have one. And that is a real possibility. So when you invade or attack a country, you have to realize the unknowns and the unintended consequences. The other thing is if you think you're going to achieve regime change, are the Israelis going to occupy Iran while that happens? Are the U.S. soldiers going to occupy Iran? This is a much bigger country than Iraq, but in a lot bigger country than Afghanistan. I just can't imagine the chaos that will ensue.
It does seem like the U.S. has been preparing for some kind of intervention. We've seen reports that refueling tankers are being repositioned across Europe, moving closer to the region. Is there anything behind the scenes that the American people aren't seeing? Because, in the halls of Congress, conversations among other senators, or maybe there's murmurings about there's going to be an effort for us to get involved. Do you see anything like that?
I think you're exactly right about pre-positioning aircraft carriers, pre-positioning tankers to refuel planes. All of that is occurring. So every bit of it could mean and lead to an impending attack, or it could be a ploy or a ruse to get Iran to negotiate. The president continues to talk about negotiating, and that's still my hope, is that he will in the end not bomb Iran in exchange for negotiations. We'll see. I think it is unknown exactly what happens at this point, but I think people need to think fully through. And I've said today already in the news, I've said, I will not vote to send one American to Iran. I'm not sending one American soldier over there, and I will not support that.
I think the last time Congress actually declared war was World War II. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's been a while, and we've fought a lot of wars since then. And that's why the whole idea, people say, oh, it's messy. Congress is feckless. It'll never get it done. Well, the interesting thing about it is Congress is fairly unified when we are attacked. When we were attacked in World War II, Congress voted nearly unanimously for that war. And when we were attacked, we didn't do a declaration after 9/11, but when we were attacked, George Bush did come to Congress and ask for a vote, and the vote was nearly unanimous once again. So I think we are unified, and we will fight when attacked and in self-defense. But that's different than a preemptive war, a preventative war, because you could use that context for anything. You could say, well, any country is has nuclear enrichment. They're going to develop a bomb. We could have done that when Pakistan developed a bomb. We could have said, if you develop a bomb, we will bomb you. We could have done it to India, So there's a lot of different instances for preemptive war, but most of the justification, I think, is not really the real justification that you need to go to war.
I don't think Trump or anyone in government is going to ask Congress for a vote, but I am curious if you think the sentiment is there among the Senate at least. I mean, maybe you can speak a little bit for what you see in the House, but do you think that if right now Trump said, I want to strike Iran, there would be at least like an authorization for military force?
I think it'd be a little bit like the Iraq War. And I agree with you. I don't think he's going to ask. But if he were to ask, I think it would actually be a divided vote. I think you'd probably find maybe 35 or 40 Democrats and maybe 10 or 15 Republicans in the Senate. That'd be a guess that would vote against. And maybe it might be a little bit less than that. Maybe it's 25 Republicans and 25 Democrats, 10 to 12 Republicans, and they actually win the vote. And I can't remember what the Iraq vote was, but the Iraq vote maybe it was closer to only 16 no's. So I think it probably would still pass, but there would be some resistance to it.
So you're in opposition to you. Let me just clarify. Your opposition is boots on the ground. Do you have an opposition to, say, U.S. airstrikes as well?
Yes. I think the airstrikes could well backfire, and they actually make us a combatant in the war. We are officially, everybody can say, yeah, you're supportive of Israel. You give all the weapons to Israel. All that's true. But we are not directly involved in this war at this point. Rubio's first statements were probably stronger than President Trump's, that we are not at war with Iran. And so, no, I think it makes a big difference. Once we start dropping bombs, we are at war. And there's no getting around that. You can try to obfuscate that. You can try to talk around it and say we're not at war. But you drop bombs, particularly very big bombs on a foreign country, you're at war with them.
The Strait of Hormuz, for those that don't know, it's the opening into the Persian Gulf where allies of the United States, trade partners, they need that access. And it's been reported that Iran says they will cut off access. So I know the U.S. is interested in maintaining that trade route. Aside from actual airstrikes, there's reports that the U.S. is going to try and send security forces to the Strait of Hormuz to try and keep it open. That could be the powder keg for which Iran does attack the U.S. It seems like a very high probability that happens if we try and go in. But I also understand why people say we can't let them just control this waterway. I'm curious on your thoughts on this one. If there was a request to say, vote on sending U.S. forces to protect the Strait of Hormuz. Would you be in favor or opposition to that?
Right. So the Straits of Hormuz, I think it's unlikely Iran blocks it. That's how they sell their oil too. So it'd be sort of suicide in a way. I think they would have to be very, very desperate at that point. But I don't know that they can sell much of theirs overland. They probably have some sale of oil overland, but their real money and their cash for their economy comes through the Straits. As far as war is war, I don't think you declare war on, we're on war over the Straits of Hormuz. Now, there is an argument, and I do accept some of this argument, that ships on the open seas and international shipping, particularly our ships, there is a role for the U.S. military in protecting our ships from being attacked. So if our ships are under attack in the Straits of Hormuz, I would consider it to be self-defense to fire back. And if we have destroyers or carriers or planes in the area, to attack any ship that attacks ours. And I think the whole world should know that, including Yemen, frankly. You can't just start shooting at our unarmed civilian ships. That is an act of war by the other country. And then us shooting back is an act of self-defense.
I think that's a potential scenario that gets us dragged into this. But so I'm just trying to understand your position on this. So the question I have then is, we've heard that Iran has, it's I believe Fordo is how it's pronounced, this deep underground nuclear enrichment facility. What is the real fear? I hear this a lot in media. They're going to get a nuclear weapon. Trump's been saying for decades they can't get a nuclear weapon, but it's not been articulated to me what the immediate threat. I obviously understand if Iran wants to nuke Israel or some other country, you've got that threat. But is there an expressed desire from Iran to get a nuke to immediately start attacking other countries, or what's the fear there?
All of it is based on, a guess, an educated guess. So we have what's called an intelligence estimate, and Tulsi Gabbard released that about 3 weeks ago. And in it, they say that the conclusion of our intelligence agencies, all the data from our agencies, eavesdropping, watching movements, watching their scientists, watching what they do, was that they're not in the process of developing a nuclear weapon. Now, they have increased enrichment, and this is sort of an important detail. We had the Iran agreement. It wasn't perfect, but they were, to a large extent, adhering to low enrichment and not enriching beyond a certain level. The first Trump administration, President Trump pulled us out of that agreement, and they did begin to enrich above the level. And people say, oh, they're breaking the agreement. Well, President Trump pulled us out of the agreement. There was no more agreement, and they were enriching more. And so the question is, was maximum pressure, more sanctions, and getting out of the agreement, did it make them more or less likely to enrich? It actually had the opposite effect. They enriched more once we got out of the agreement. So getting out of the agreement and adding sanctions had the opposite effect of what was intended. We got more enrichment. It's the same thing now. Will bombing them cause them to feel contrition and say we're no longer going to do this, or will bombing them piss them off? People tend to rally together when your country's attacked, and even though the mullahs aren't popular, the Ayatollah I don't think is popular either. But do people rally together when they think their country is under, or see their country under attack? There is a possibility that they rally together and that they move on towards a nuclear weapon. It's also important to remember that when you enrich uranium, a cup of highly enriched uranium is likely to be enough for a bomb, a cup full. So once you get to that, there's no bombing that. You could put that anywhere. What if you had 10 cupfuls? So you have enough for 10 bombs, and you put that in the process, and then you hide the warheads. Those can be hidden anywhere. And so there's no way, I think, that you militarily can stop that. You also can't bomb away knowledge. They have the knowledde to do this. Now that the Israelis have been killing their scientists, but I'm not sure you can bomb away their knowledge of creating nuclear weapons. All that being said, I have the same wishes as President Trump. I don't want them to have a nuclear weapon. I wish they would choose peace. But I think we have to be prepared for the unintended consequences of the Israelis' actions.
The challenge that I see is, with the Iranian-backed militias in the region that have already attacked U.S. troops, and not that I'm a fan, I don't think the U.S. should be over there, but we have been attacked. If Iran does get nuclear material, like you mentioned, even a cupful, it's not the idea, in my opinion, of an ICBM. It's what if they make a dirty bomb and hand it off to a bunch of wackos who then go who knows where and just detonate in an urban center? That is worrying to me. So it really does feel like this issue is a razor's edge, where the U.S. is being called on to be the world police.
Yeah. So, we have to make these predictions and estimates. So the intelligence estimate says they're not creating a nuclear weapon, but the other estimate is, are they rational actors? So we have these briefings all the time. They're classified, but what I'm telling you is not classified. They say, do you assess North Korea as a rational actor? And the consensus still is that even though they do some crazy things in North Korea, they treat their people abominably, and half of them are starving because socialism doesn't work. But at the same time, they assess them to be rational actors that are not suicidal. So Kim Jong-un has a lot of peculiarities, but they assess him to be a rational actor and that he doesn't want to just set off a bomb in North Korea because he would be wiped out. So the idea of being mutually assured destruction as deterring people, that deters only rational people. Right. But it's the same with Iran. We don't like them. They're our enemy, all of this. They don't have freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom of religion, all the things that we cherish, they don't have. So it's probably a rotten place to live. But at the same time, we have to assess, would they bomb Tel Aviv or Jerusalem with a nuclear weapon, knowing what happens? If they do, they would be annihilated. There is certain annihilation, most likely from Israel, but there would be certain annihilation. It would be devastating. And the other thing about nuclear war is you drop a bomb on Tel Aviv, the nuclear fallout could be in Iran. The nuclear fallout could be in Jordan. It could be all over the place. Syria, the whole place could be a mess and uninhabitable. And if you have two nuclear bombs go off, one there and one in Iran, it's not something that a rational person would want to have happen. So I still am hopeful that we don't bomb Tehran or the nuclear sites. I'm hopeful that this brings them to the table.
Me too. I did want to ask you about the big beautiful bill. During COVID lockdown, your challenging of Fauci, particularly when, as it was described by Newsweek, he was untruthful to you as to gain-of-function research. I mean, everybody was cheering you on, the MAGA base, the libertarians. But now there's a lot of Trump supporters who are angry with you for not getting behind his big beautiful bill. And I'm curious, if you could just lay out the basics of why you're opposed to it.
Yeah, so the big beautiful bill has a couple different components. I think the most important component of it is the tax cuts. It's reaffirming the tax cuts that I supported in 2017. I still support these tax cuts, and I support making them permanent. There is an argument among the government bean counters up here that if you cut taxes, you'll have lower revenue. I actually don't think they're accurate. And I think that when the taxes were cut in 2017 and when they were cut in the 1980s by Ronald Reagan, you ended up getting more growth of the economy and more revenue. So I am for the tax cuts. And if the bill were just the tax cuts, I'd be a yes. There needs to be some spending cuts because initially when you cut taxes, revenue will go down for a year or two. We're also $2 trillion in the hole. Even if you start without this bill at all, what does this bill do? What are we doing beyond this bill? Spending $2 trillion more than bring in. We bring in about $5 trillion and we spend $7 trillion. That has to be fixed. That is an imminent threat to our national security is our debt. So we have to do more on spending cuts. So I don't think the bill has enough spending cuts. But then there's a third component to the bill, and that's raising the debt ceiling by $5 trillion. This will be the largest increase in debt ever contemplated in our country. It will be a record, a bad record, and it will now be owned by the Republicans. No Democrats will vote for this. The Republicans will own a $5 trillion increase in the debt ceiling. What does this mean? It's sort of like if you give your 16-year-old a credit card, which, by the way, I don't advise, bad idea, but if you give them a credit card and they go up against their credit limit of $2,000, do you restrict them or do you give them another $10,000 in credit? This is like the Congress is as bad as terrible teenagers. They have a terrible history with money. They are bad with money. So we shouldn't give them an extensive credit line. We should give them a very narrow credit line, and we should keep voting on it every 3 months to make sure that their promises that they're going to behave and they're going to act in a more fiscally responsible manner to make sure those promises are accurate. So I'd give them 3 months, and I'd say, come back to me in 3 months and show me what you've done for the American people.
This has been, as long as I've been alive, as long as I've been alive, this has been the methodology. You not only do they give this, they increase the credit limit. So you get a 16-year-old, you give them a 10 grand limit, they max it out. They come back to you and say, well, I can pay it back later, I swear, but just give me another 10 grand on the limit. And every year it's just increasing the limit on how much. And so my understanding is this, of the debt ceiling, is basically the U.S. government just agrees to pay vendors and contractors who are engaging in employees. So basically it's the debt ledger of the government, and they owe most of this money to our own people, various companies. That's how it works, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
And the interesting thing is, and I'm not arguing not to raise the debt ceiling, but let's say we didn't raise the debt ceiling, what would happen? Our income each month is about $400 billion, and our interest payment's about $80 billion. So we have plenty of revenue every month to pay our interest payment. If you have a mortgage on your house, and the most important thing is not being homeless, you'd pay the mortgage out of your first amount of money that comes in, and you'd pay your other things. What would happen if we didn't raise the debt ceiling? You would immediately have to have a balanced budget. You wouldn't default. You would pay your $80 billion. You'd probably pay your Social Security money so people can eat. You'd probably pay your Medicare money and Medicaid, and then you'd go on to other things. But everything would have to be reduced dramatically. If you didn't raise your debt ceiling, it'd be probably a 25 or 35% restriction in spending. That would be difficult probably to do. Actually, I would probably do it. But in the meantime, we're probably not going to do that. I think the reasonable position is raise the debt ceiling 3 months, which is actually $500 billion for 3 months. And then in 3 months more, what will happen in 3 months? It'll be the end of the fiscal year. And you know what they're going to be talking about? A big, beautiful omnibus. Yep. That comes in 3 months. In just 3 months, we'll go through this whole thing again, and it'll probably be enormous spending levels. And if the debt ceiling were up, I would say, I'm not doing it. I'm not voting for the debt ceiling if you're not going to restrain spending.
But what does this mean for the average American, right? Your middle-class family. Why should the debt ceiling matter to you?
Debt matters more particularly than actually the debt ceiling, but the debt matters because the Federal Reserve buys the debt, and they buy that with money that's created. It's brand new money. They essentially print it up, it rolls out into the economy, and it causes your prices to rise. So the prices that were rising during the Biden administration, when you go to the grocery store and chicken and hamburger and all these things cost 20% more, that's inflation. It means the value of the dollar is shrinking, and it's from debt. So debt causes inflation. Inflation hurts worse the people on fixed income and lower income. So old people on fixed income and younger people who have lower incomes get demolished by inflation because their wages don't keep up with the inflation that rises faster than their wages. So debt is important. And to me, it's part of what I call the bait and switch. Politicians come and they say, we've got free stuff. I got free health care. I'll give you free college. I'll give you a free car. I got free everything. I just give it to you for free. What they don't tell you is they're having to borrow money to give you free stuff. When they give you the free stuff that they borrowed money for, all the prices go up, and you keep scratching your head saying, how come I didn't get ahead? I got all this free stuff and I'm still poor. And it's this endless cycle of poverty, free stuff, and then inflation, and people are still mired in this poverty. So it's a terrible system.
I hear you on all this, but it really does sound like you're the lone guy trying to knock down a mountain with a hammer.
It still might happen. And here's what I tell people, because some people really want things that are in this bill. And many of the things I'm for. I tell them, look, if I'm the deciding vote, I will be a yes, but they will have to negotiate with me. I'm not just going to be a yes just to be the deciding vote. If there are 49 votes for this, President Trump will call me and he'll yell at me for an hour, which I'm okay with that. I've survived that in the past. I can survive it again. But after he's done yelling at me for an hour, he's going to say, what does it take? And I'm going to say, separate vote on the debt ceiling. He says, I hate that. Just vote for it. I said, I'm not going to. And I've been holding out for 6 months. They knew this 6 months ago. I told them from the very beginning, I'm not voting for the debt ceiling. So is there a chance that I become the deciding vote? Maybe. All the stories are saying they don't have the votes right now.
Wow.
There's four conservatives. It's hard to believe there's only four, but there's four conservatives that are holding out for more cuts in the Senate. And then there's about between 4 and 6 moderate to liberal Republicans who want more spending. So we have this tug of war back and forth. But the one thing they know is Nobody on the moderate side has been an absolute no. I'm an absolute no unless they change it. So they know where I am, but I tell them every day I'm gettable.
People have.
I can vote yes, but you got to get rid of the debt ceiling. I'm not voting for $5 trillion in debt.
There's a massive amount of funding in the bill for ICE and CBP. And because this is the big issue for everybody right now, Trump, immigration was the second biggest issue for voters in 2024. There are a lot of people coming out now saying that you're an open borders guy, making the insinuation that the reason you're actually against this is because you don't want funding for border protection and for immigration.
These are coming from attack dogs in the White House. They're coming from paid influencers, and they're coming from people who would rip up the Constitution. The people in charge of the attack campaign on me are the people who say that habeas corpus, we don't really need that. I mean, the right to ask for a representation, why you've been charged and why the government has thrown you in jail is a 1,000-year-old right. It may be the most important of all constitutional or human rights, the right to be told what you're accused of and to have representation, that the government or the dictator has to present the body. You're taken out of the dungeon. They tell you why they're holding you, and you get a chance to resist that in court. That's habeas corpus. The person leading the fight against me said, we might need to suspend habeas corpus. But on the borders, I'm not for open borders. On the borders, I'm for increasing spending on the borders. They misreport this. They say, he's for cutting border spending. He's for lowering border spending. No, I'm not. The bill increases it by $150 billion.
Wow.
I'm for increasing it less than that because I'm still fiscally conservative, even for stuff I want. But here's the thing is the math doesn't add up. They sent me the bill 3 weeks ago. It says $46.5 billion just for the wall. Nothing else, just the wall. So I ask Google, I ask the search engine, how much does a fence cost? It takes you to the Customs and Border Patrol website, and this is the government. This is the Department of Homeland Security. They said it costs $6.5 million per mile. Well, if you multiply that by 1,000, which is about what probably needs to be fenced, that's $6.5 billion. So you have the government asking for 46.5 and the math saying 6.5. It's the emperor has no clothes. Everybody's like looking the other way. Nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. Nobody's asking any questions. And so I asked Secretary Noem in the committee, I said, look, your border website says only 6.5 million. Interestingly, about a day later, they took that off the website. That's no longer on the website, but she responded to me 12 million per mile. I said, okay, well, that's twice what your website is, but you multiply 12 million times 1,000, you get 12 billion. So it's still 12 billion versus 46 billion. They've never explained the difference between their wanting 46.5 billion and 12 billion.
Sounds like government.
This is where I have this problem. We are either conservative or we're not. I am for border security, but just because I'm a moron doesn't mean I no longer care about the day.
No. Looks like we're having internet. It's thunderstorming right now. Let me see if I can reload, bring this back in. It's not looking good, actually. All right. It's thunderstorming right now pretty bad. Let me see if I can reload this. That's a bummer. Our internet did drop off. I just saw it. Can you still hear me?
I can now. You got most of that. Unfortunately, my vote
was my fault.
It's about to end. I'd love to do it again if you want to do it again sometime. Today was just a really crazy day for our voting.
Oh, yeah, no, I really appreciate it. It's thunderstorming. I don't know if it's storming in D.C., but our internet just cut out. But where can people find you to learn more?
Rand Paul, something on the internet, anywhere you'll find me. We have, we're on Facebook. We have government website. I got a government Twitter. We got a
All right. Well, I lost him again. Senator Rand Paul, if you end up hearing this, I really do appreciate it. I'm a big fan. Me personally, I'll say to you guys, I want the bill to pass. And so I appreciated hearing that he was going to be a yes vote. If it came down to him, he wouldn't let it fail. And I hate the deficit spending. It is a trick by which the government is able to tax the American people. They can take your money without you realizing it by increasing the debt ceiling, racking up a bunch of debt. Basically, the simplified, and probably missing a lot of nuance. Government says, hey, we need someone to mop the floors. That costs $1,000. Uh-oh, we're at the debt limit. Hey, increase the debt limit by 1,000. Hey, guy, mop the floors, we'll give you $1,000. We'll pay you in 30 days. At the end of the month, we'll pay you for your services. End of the month comes around, and they got to take a look at the money they got and the debt they have and how they're going to pay it. The Fed comes in and says, we'll buy the debt. Here's the dollars. Boom. Now there's a bunch of new money in the economy, but nothing new was created. The government just simply said, do a thing, and then money was created. The way the economy is supposed to work to be healthy is there has to be an equal amount of goods and services produced that are being traded among the people. Another way to put it is, imagine there are 10 guys, each with one apple, and the apples sell for $1. Everybody trades $1 around, and they all trade their apples with each other for whatever reason you get. It's a widget. Call it a widget. If you add a random 11th guy and say, we're going to print $1, he walks in and without providing any service to that group of people is able to extract one of the widgets from the group. This is inflation. Now there's an extra person who didn't contribute to production. This is the problem with mass government spending. That being said, I think what we need in this country is to fix our border. Trump, I say, I get it, man. We've long seen this agenda from Congress. It never works out. Maybe I'm naive. Maybe I'm dumb. I say, give Trump his agenda, and let's hope this is the guy who makes a difference this time. If we can maintain control, if Trump's agenda works, we can start to reverse course on all of these problems. But if we obstruct the path of Donald Trump, and it's not just him, it's his administration, his advisors in immigration enforcement, border security, and foreign policy, Democrats get back in, and what happens? The cycle never stops. But if we can restructure these things with this opportunity, again, probably naive. I'm willing to bet you go to any older person and say, Tim, we talked about this in the 90s, in the 80s, in the 70s. Yep. And if that's the case, then so be it. We are doomed to repeat it. But for me, for what I've seen in my life, the best I can say is I give Trump the benefit of the doubt because it is something somewhat different. If we can stop the cheating from the Democratic Party through immigration, if we can enforce our laws, if we can have a cultural resurgence, we are seeing conservatives having more kids, more people are becoming religious. Maybe we'll turn this around. Apologies to Senator Rand Paul, but he got our internet got dropped. It's storming really bad here. It's been storming nonstop for like a month, and so these things happen. But it's an honor and a privilege, Senator Rand Paul. I appreciate you joining me and having a discussion on these issues. I agree with him on all of that stuff about the debt, but I'm just like, just vote for it, bruh. That being said, he did state if it comes to him, he will vote for it. I like this guy. You know, this dude, Rand Paul, he's the guy who called out Fauci. Everybody cheered for him on the gain of function research. And now people are trying to say he should be primaried. Ridiculous. He's one of the best that we got in Congress. My friends, we're going to raid our friend Russell Brand. So let me gear up to grab that stream. You can follow me on X and Instagram at Timcast. This has been your Rumble Morning Hour. And let's trigger that raid for you guys. We're back tonight at 8 p.m. at rumble.com/TimcastIRL. You got to come hang out. Come hang out. Shout out to Steven Crowder and the Mug Club once again. You guys rock. Thank you for hanging out with me. I really do appreciate it. It means a lot. Timcast IRL, come hang out with us there. And we want to hear your thoughts. We like the comments. We like the Rumble rants, Super Chats, all of that. Share the show with everyone you know. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you all tonight.